Thank you. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, finally able to talk about the Green Paper and to present it to you. I know that you've had a presentation already this morning by Pauline Demek-Hack of the President's Cabinet, who's given you already an outline of the political rationale for the proposal and the key elements of it. I will try to give you a little bit more detail on the specifics of the proposal. So let me just outline what I will be talking to you about today. First of all, I will emphasize why this is a Commission priority, some key facts about where we are now and where we want to get to, some short-term priorities which have already been identified in the investment plan for Europe, a few words about the specific consultations on securitization and the prospectus directive, which were published at the same time as the Green Paper. And then I will go through the key chapters of the Green Paper in a little bit more detail. First of all, on access to finance, then on developing and diversifying the supply of funding, and then finally, how to make the investment chain more effective. And then a few words about the approach, overall approach, and the timeline. So as I'm sure you heard already from Paulina, this is clearly a Commission priority. It was outlined in President Juncker's political guidelines to the European Parliament. And Commissioner Hill, of course, is seeking to implement this as a matter of priority. It's part of his portfolio title, and the name of the DG that works to him has been changed to reflect the fact that we are responsible for Capital Markets Union. And the Commissioner wants very much to build this from the bottom up and to identify and knock down the barriers to Capital Markets Union so that we can unlock the capital which is too often frozen in the EU at the moment and put it to productive use to help generate growth and jobs. It's clearly about growth and jobs. It's a classical single market project for the 28. We've seen that bank lending has tightened in many member states, especially those worst affected by the crisis. And so we're looking to provide a more diverse range of financing options for businesses, in particular for SMEs, but also for infrastructure projects. And we think this is an excellent complement to the investment plan. It makes the investment plan more sustainable in the medium to long term. And this is not a new issue, of course. The free movement of capital is a long-standing objective of the Union, but the pressing need for growth makes this all the more urgent, and we are seeking to use the momentum that the search for growth and jobs is providing. As you know, capital markets in the EU have grown substantially in the last 20 years, but they are still not as developed as many other of our international competitors, of course the United States, but even China. Capital markets are more developed in China relative to GDP than they are in the European Union. And we see also considerable discrepancies in the level of development of capital markets across the EU. So we think that Capital Markets Union has great potential to benefit also smaller member states with less developed capital markets. We know that mid-sized companies receive 5 times as much funding from capital markets in the United States than they do in the European Union. And if we had venture capital markets as liquid in the European Union as in the United States, this would have generated an additional 90 billion euros of funding over the last 5 years. And if we could safely revive securitization markets to only half of the level that they were before the crisis, then this would generate an additional 25 billion of funding for SMEs. So what we want to achieve is barrier-free movement of capital in the European Union, accessible information about investment opportunities and risks, especially for SMEs. We want to have more proportionate regulatory burden and, if possible, achieve more similar costs of investing across the Union, and we want investors to be able to better understand the risks. Of course, the objective is to put in place the building blocks for CMU by 2019. As I said, it's a 28 member state project, and it will be built on the foundations of financial stability that we have achieved through the single rule book and through the banking union. Already in the investment plan, we indicated that there were certain areas where we thought that progress could be made in the short term, and that these are areas where we think that there is wide agreement on the need for action, and we wanted to already get working and not just wait for the Green Paper consultation. So already in parallel to the Green Paper, we are taking forward work on these priority areas. First of all, the Prospectus Directive review, that's about looking to reduce the barriers to access capital markets, in particular for SMEs. We're looking to improve credit information on SMEs, which is too often held by banks and is not accessible to non-bank investors. We want to build a sustainable securitization market, and I'll come back to that in a few moments. We want to boost the take-up of European long-term investment funds. The regulation, as you know, was adopted late last year. We want to make sure that the first LTIFs are a success and that there's a good take-up of these new funds. And we want to develop private placement markets. On the Prospectus Directive review, the objective is to make it easier for companies to raise capital, and in particular for SMEs. We're looking at how we can reduce the administrative burdens for companies without jeopardizing investor protection. So in particular, the consultation will examine ways to simplify the information included in prospectuses. It'll look at when is a prospectus necessary and when is it not, and also whether we can streamline the approval process. And also securitization is a key priority as well. As you know, the ECB and the Bank of England have been working on this and have been calling for action by the EU institutions to ensure more sustainable, standardized, transparent securitization markets. And that's what we're working towards, to make sure that securitization is done in a transparent way, that the products are more comparable, and that there is a high degree of standardization across products. But beyond these areas, we're looking to consult on what else we should be doing in order to achieve a capital markets union. And we identified three main areas of action which are outlined in the Green Paper. First of all, how can we improve access to finance for all businesses, but in particular for SMEs and for long-term infrastructure projects? How can we make sure that the sources of financing from both within the EU and from outside it are more diversified and are developed? And how can we make the investment chain connecting investors and projects in need of finance more effective and less costly? So the Green Paper outlines a number of barriers that we see in these areas, and in some cases indicates certain possible avenues of action which we are considering, and seeks views from interested parties on these issues. It's not an exhaustive list, of course, and we would welcome feedback from stakeholders on other areas which are not mentioned in the Green Paper. But to give you an indication of some of the issues which are looked at, on access to finance, we look at issues of information barriers and difficulties in getting information about SMEs and getting information to SMEs about alternatives to bank finance. So we know that, for example, in some member states, when an SME has an application for a loan declined, they are provided information about other possible sources of finance. And is this something that we should do more widely in the European Union? There are concerns that the accounting rules for SMEs are too burdensome, and perhaps there is a need to develop a more tailored system of accounting for SMEs. We know that many people are telling us that there are problems getting information about infrastructure projects, and so we're looking at the idea of developing a European investment project pipeline, a sort of dedicated website to make it easier to access information about infrastructure projects. We also think that standardization can play a role in kickstarting markets. And standardization does not necessarily mean legislation. It could be done also by market-led initiatives, as we have seen with private placement. A guide on documentation for private placement, for pan-European private placement, has been developed, and we're very supportive of that, and we're watching it closely and hope that it will succeed. And maybe this is also needed in certain other areas. We know that in covered bonds, we have certain markets like Germany and Denmark where covered bonds are very well developed. But can we build on those well-functioning national models and develop a more pan-European covered bond market? We're also looking to boost institutional investment through measures such as how to reduce the costs of setting up and marketing UCITS across borders. We're looking at measures to boost pensions as a source of funding for investors. And of course, we want to see how to develop venture capital funds, including whether we should review our recently adopted regulation on EU venture capital funds to make it easier for these funds to be offered and to enhance the take-up of these funds. And retail investment is, of course, also a priority. We want to see, in particular, how we can enhance cross-border competition in retail financial services to deliver more benefits to consumers. Of course, we don't operate in isolation. We are in an international global economy, and we want to make sure that the EU attracts investment from all over the world. And so we're asking whether there are steps that we can take to make the EU even more attractive as a destination for investment, and how we can help EU firms to access third country markets. And then thirdly, we're looking at how to make the investment chain more effective. Many of these issues are long-standing issues. They're not always new. Issues like company law and insolvency law have been dealt with for many years, and they're very sensitive. But nevertheless, we want to see whether there is possibility to make progress on tangible, concrete measures that might make a difference to capital markets union. And we also want to reflect on how we can use the single market rulebook and competition law more effectively to enforce existing principles to help capital flow effectively across borders. And the issue of supervisory convergence. We have already carried out one review of the functioning of the European supervisory authorities. We will look at the actions that we outlined in that report, in particular as it concerns ESMA, and we will look again at the questions of supervisory convergence, whether that can be further enhanced, and also the funding of the ESAs. Amongst the other issues that we're looking at is how can we ensure better information on securities across the EU, including through a consolidated tape. Market infrastructure questions such as the recovery and resolution of CCPs and how we can ensure a cross-border flow of collateral. As I mentioned, company law and insolvency law, these are also issues which we will look at, and we're looking to see where we can make tangible progress. And of course, technology is also an area which is a key concern. Fintech is rapidly developing, and we want to see also whether we can integrate the benefits of digitalization more into capital markets. So briefly to conclude, this is the approach to seek to increase the supply investment, to make markets work better, and increase access to finance, always underpinned by the single rulebook and the financial stability which that brings. As you may have heard already from Paulina, we don't think that legislation will always be necessary, but in some cases it will. But in many cases, we think that market-driven solutions can be effective, and we will look to use those wherever possible, and also to use competition law and single market law where necessary. So stakeholders have until the 13th of May to respond to our consultation, and we will be engaging also with member states, with parliamentarians at national and European level. We'll be holding a certain number of workshops in the coming weeks, so there'll be many opportunities for interested parties to contribute. There will be a conference on the 8th of June, which will draw together the consultation process, and we expect to publish the action plan in the summer of this year. Thank you very much.